Welcome to Whisperwood Stories. Today, we read a story from user/Ardent Purpose. Let's begin. Prosperine. Screaming erupted into the stillness of the night, making me snap my head to the gas station to see a figure running out into the night, leaving footprints in a liquid that was illuminated from the streetlight. I took a moment's glance to see it was blood before I burst into the station, the ringer going off. I was greeted with a vision straight from hell itself. There were so many bare legs hanging from the ceiling, flailing, kicking. It looked as though they had grown from the ceiling instead of a forced entry. I was in such a shock that I couldn't remember if there had been customers, as I looked down beneath the legs at the small puddles of blood, some of which had footprints dashed across them, leading away from the cashier huddled in the corner of the doors. The cashier's back was facing me. Reason told me to run. Reason told me that there was no helping the cashier. Whatever was happening was beyond the mortal realm of matters. But at the same time, something clicked inside of me. Something more powerful than reason that compelled me forwards across the gore-streaked floor. I dodged and maneuvered through the flailing limbs to the cashier, and when I was close enough, I knelt and put a hand on their shoulder. It didn't surprise me that my hand was firm and strong instead of limp and quaking. But I felt my heart swell with emotion as I stared at the faceless cashier looking back at me. Prosperine took. She had stuttered before the station's ringer went off. I immediately turned to see a figure in a long white trench coat standing in my doorway. Long, raven black hair hung loose down its gore-streaked coat as it took its hood off to reveal a feminine face that evoked the word Hesperides. The two small but razor-sharp horns on its skull did not detract, but magnified its beauty. I felt my heart swell achingly again at the mere sight of the figure. I almost forgot your lily blue eyes. 3 voices spoke at once from its thin, blood-red lips as it gazed at the cashier. Before turning that gaze to me, one corner of those blood-red lips curled upward into what looked like a crooked smile. As a third horn rose between the 2 smaller ones, at the tip of the third horn was an open eye that didn't just look at me. It felt as though it was looking into my very soul, seeing all of my memories, and feeling all my emotions, searching. It must have found what it was looking for as the figure's lips turned into a full smile. "Do you want to live?" it asked. The masculine part of the 3 voices was dominant in that simple question. A very simple yes or no question that barely reached me in my current state of, was it fear? Or maybe even excitement? I didn't care which it was, and I don't care, I had finally said in a calm voice as I looked from its third eye to its 2 magnificent fiery yellow eyes. I stared into those eyes, unflinching, almost forgetting everything until it pointed one clawed finger at the hanging lips. I looked at them to see they weren't flailing anymore, and slowly, one of them began to fall to the floor with a thud, and then one by one, they began to fall. I braced myself against the ones above me and flung them off before quickly looking back to the doorway to see the figure was gone. I heard a sickly crunching noise and looked back at the cashier, saw that she was impaled by one of the limb's sharp bones piercing completely out the backside of her head. I watched, almost without a single emotion, as she tried to pry it from her head, before the movements became weaker and weaker, and finally stopped, as she gurgled up blood and fell back against the wall, almost without a single emotion, but the sudden fiery burn in my chest that I needed to engage in. As I stood up and waded through the limbs to the doors, the ringer went off as I stepped out into the cold night and was greeted by fresh, cold air. I looked around desperately before seeing the figure standing by the streetlight, patiently waiting. I felt my heart swell achingly again, and the emotion set afire as it raised its clawed head and waved invitingly at me. I stared into Prosperine's fiery yellow eyes, never feeling as calm as then, and took its invitation into a world beyond our own as I began to walk to it. Hadean, Providence. I called it a tulpa because that was the closest description I could have given it. But that isn't what it was. I didn't create it in an act of desperation out of loneliness. I didn't create it at all. It first appeared in my dreams, always watching and never interacting, as though it was conducting research from the observations I'd made, which it might as well have, since I found out the dreams I was having weren't just dreams. It was playing back my memories from my birth to the moment of what transpired yesterday. I call it dream infiltration, and eventually, it started to appear in full apparition. In the dreams, it was always a blur, as though it were moving in speeds too great to register. But in what was considered real life, it looked androgynous and beautiful, to suffice the word. Just like how the depiction of a demon appears in some media forms. I still don't know if it is a demon, not to this day. It is evil and somehow righteous at the same time, like two halves complementing each other. It told me once that it frazzles down a person's soul to induce a suffering in them. It sweetens it, but that it only does it indiscriminately. It doesn't choose out of prejudice or persecution, or so it seems. But that's just me, applying human terms to something that defies humanity altogether. I have to remember not to deal with this entity in human terms at all. It's not fair and it's not indignant. But on to other matters. Its name is Prosperine, and it's existed since before Christ walked the earth. It's seen the best and worst that mankind has prospered in history. It's been enlightened at our endeavors and disenchanted at our folly. But throughout it all, its existence was never threatened once. How could you do harm to something that watched your dreams and nightmares? You couldn't, unless you were an inquisitor of matters beyond your own life. Even when it made its full physical apparition, it was impervious to our weapons. But sometimes I wonder what a vial of holy water would do to the physical apparition. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if a cross touched its extremely paper-pale skin. But I digress. I have no need to harm Prosperine, Not that I can, anyways. The one of 4 things I adore about this almost ethereal company of mine is the fact that it talks in 3 voices. I could detect a male and female's voice in it, and what must be its own. It used the dominant masculine voice whenever it needed to assert, and the feminine voice when it was calm or flirtatious. It rarely used its own voice, and when it did, it had the most strange effect on my ears in my head, as though it was not meant to hear such a sound. But I still found it more beautiful than the previous voices. I don't know why, but maybe it was because it was a reminder that mankind had realities beyond this one, that we would explore someday on our own, when our bodies expired and our souls left to traverse those realities. Sometimes I get so lost in thoughts about what could be and what would be in the next life that I have to remind myself to live for this moment, for now at least. For now, things were copacetic. I maintained a somewhat normal routine of efficiency at work, exercise at the gym, balancing time with my colleagues. The human part of my life that I had to be careful not to let slip through my fingers, for now. I suppose I should tell the truth about one thing, though. I didn't meet Prosperine in my dreams, at random, for no reason. It happened one night when I had stopped at the gas station. To put it in short, I interrupted Prosperine at its time of hunger. It turned the gas station into a nightmare that could only be described as Lovecraftian. I intervened to save the gas clerk before Prosperine came back to finish her off. And that's when we met. It read my mind in the first glance, and it did it with its third eye sticking out from the middle of 3 small horns on its head. It read everything about me and knew why I wasn't as terrified as I stared defiantly into its 2 magnificently fiery yellow, orange, and red eyes. And I even think that it felt the fire that was burning in my chest from the impression of its blood-red lips, curved into a full smile, baring its hooked teeth. Since that night, it stayed with me, and I stayed with it. 2 polar opposites, 2 different halves, complementing each other in ways that can only be expressed through the worlds, or film, or literature. Nothing comes close in this reality to what we are. I don't know if it's a demon or not, but it's not the only one of its kind. I know that for sure, since the dreams I've had of other visitors that Prosperine brings to show off its other half. It doesn't terrify me, even though sometimes they threaten me in a language I can't comprehend. It only lightens the flame in my chest for more, for glimpses into their world, for more comprehension of their language and culture, and maybe even the chance to become what they are. I think they could turn mortals, but it's only done on rare occasions that require the utmost religious devotion to the ritual. So Prosperine tells me. I have no reason to doubt it, but the chance of this magnitude passing by because I messed up was a fear that tightened in my stomach, like a serpent that threatened to put out the fire in my chest. Doubt is a poison greater than that of cyanide. It festers inside you, sapping your strength and will. It eats away at your resolve until you're second-guessing yourself and others constantly. I loathe it so much, But I have to be greater than that, not just for myself, but enough for now. It's night, and the crescent moon is high in the sky, watching over Earth like a mother to her child. I have work tomorrow, but I think I'll stay up and watch the stars start to fade away as dawn approaches. Not alone, mind you. After all, Prosperine is here with me right now, musing as I write this and smiling its ever devilish smile. For now, we were bathing in the rich life of this world. For now, we were whole. Thank you for listening to Whisperwood Stories. If you enjoyed, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe down below. Do you have a story that you'd like me to read here? Consider commenting or sending it to whisperwoodsubmissions@gmail.com. The stories in this video were read and slightly altered with the author's permission. Thank you again for listening, and be sure to check out the original Reddit posts. Don't let the shadows get too close.